الله اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله وصي رسول الله وخليفته بلا فاصل. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله كرم الله تعالى صلى الله عليه وسلم. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم اجعل قلبي بارا وعملي سارا وعشيكارا ورزقي دارا وأولادي أبرارا واجعل عند قبر نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مستقرا وقرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على
للعالمين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على وعلى تمام عدة المرسلين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وأصحابه المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا ومولانا وإمام زماننا الحجة المنتظر المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم قرآنه المجيد وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. 2 weeks ago we spoke about the idea of the spirit and the soul, and the idea that we are not just a body but we are also a soul, and it is that soul that we are meant to revive and bring alive, such that even when we pass away, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ. Do not say about those who have died in the way of Allah as dead, بَلْ أَحْيَاء, they are alive. Because that ruh, that soul, that nafs inside them is truly alive. And for those individuals who ignore this soul, ignore this nafs, and they live as though they are just a jism, when their body passes away, that nafs is unable to stay alive in the manner it is meant to. It's too much for it. And so true life comes from the life of the nafs, the life of the soul inside us. This is what we're meant to give life to. Today I wanted to talk about this idea of spiritual awareness, awareness of the soul in our day-to-day lives. And I'd like to talk about the Quranic concept of the stages of the soul, as we're told normally, and analyze this concept in a little bit of detail so that we can understand what we mean by this and try to analyze ourselves in light of this. If I have your permission, please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. On the first level, you find Islamically, the idea of the soul is ingrained in everything that we do. From the first stage of any act of worship, it is wajib to make a niyyah, an intention. Why am I doing this? That in itself is taking away just the bodily component, because the intention, where does it originate from? It originates from the soul. It originates from the inside mind, the individual inside you. You know, when I say, who are you? What is you? You wouldn't say to me, my body part, this amazing body that I've sculpted is me. You'd say there's something about you, your identity, your psyche. Which is why some of the ulama say nafs should be translated as psyche, or yourself. And so when our acts of worship come, we are meant to have a niyyah. That niyyah comes from that soul inside us to tell us, why am I doing this action? And then when you go to every act of worship, there is always an inner component of it. For example, adhan. Adhan is highly recommended before every salat, even if you're on your own. Now in public it makes sense. Adhan makes sense. You're announcing the prayer to everybody. If you're all by yourself, why is adhan mustahab? What difference does it make? I'm by myself. Why am I announcing the prayer to myself? You're calling your soul towards worship. You're trying to remind your soul, I need to come towards worship now. How many times we're praying salat, our body is doing all of the actions. Our soul is completely elsewhere. Adhan was actually there for a spiritual component to call your soul towards worship. And then you have the salat. When we're reciting salat, Ayatollah Khimani mentions a beautiful tradition from Wasa'il al-Shia, I believe from Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, or Imam al-Sadiq, either of the two, where they say that the believer is a jama'ah. The mu'min praying in salat by himself, he is in jama'ah, he is in congregation. He says the soul is the imam, the body is the ma'mum. The soul is leading the prayer, the body is just following the prayer. And then Ayatollah Khomeini goes on to ponder, how many of us does our body lead the prayer and our soul go elsewhere? Our soul is not even following sometimes. Our soul is just completely somewhere else and the body is praying the prayer. Rather, we were meant to have our soul leading the prayer and our body just following. When the soul truly recognizes the might of Allah, then we announce Allahu Akbar. We let the body follow the soul. We only make an action when we recognize what we're doing inside of us. In zakat comes from a root word which means tazkiyah, purification. So the outward action of zakat is to give charity or to give some tax, to give some money. But the inward of it is the purification of the soul, because in giving out lies the purification of that soul. The ridding it of its covetousness, of its greediness. Fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about keeping away from food and drink from sunrise to sunset, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says what? كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Fasting was prescribed not for a bodily benefit. Not so that you have a body detox once a year. Nowadays there are many medical studies about the benefits of intermittent fasting. But this is not the meaning of fasting. This was not why fasting was prescribed. Fasting was prescribed so that your soul could come to life, so that you could start to recognize your soul. You could start to talk to your soul, recognize that there is something inside you that keeps you going even when you're not eating and drinking. Life does not need to be about your material possessions and food and breakfast and lunch and dinner. Life is about more than these things. And so we find, if you go through every act of worship, it is the soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to recognize at all times, so that we can start to train and nurture that soul. Recognize that soul, pay attention to that soul, and then start to train that soul, nurture that soul. This is where Ayatollah Khomeini, he beautifully has this concept where he says in Adab al-Salat, he says that recognize that your soul is like an infant child. And in the same way you nurture an infant child, you have to nurture that soul inside you. Now let us look at the Holy Quran, and when it talks about the different stages, as we normally say, of the soul, you will find the ulama classically say that there are 3 stages of the soul in the Holy Quran. Number 1, found in Surah Yusuf, Surah 12, verse 53. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Yusuf alayhi salam, or according to some Mufassirin, Zulaykha says that surely I do not have any control, or I do not make my soul immune. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. Surely my soul commands towards evil, except that which my Lord has mercy upon me on. And so we have this first concept that the nafs inside us, the ego, the soul, the psyche, it calls towards its own evil. It calls towards itself in fulfilling itself. That, according to the ulama, is the lowest stage of the nafs. An individual who is in nafs al-ammara, he does exactly what the nafs wants him to do. When the nafs calls him towards a desire, it follows it. It is like a parent that gives in to all of the child's wishes and desires. Our children are ma'soom until the age of 5. But we know that doesn't mean that everything that they do is correct. We want to feed them food, they don't like it, they spit it out. They don't like something, they push it away. At night, they don't want to sleep, they'll cry and keep you awake. Our soul, children are ma'soom, but that does not mean everything they do is correct. We have to nurture that child. Our soul is created ma'soom. That doesn't mean everything it wants is correct. We have to nurture that soul. Allah in the Quran alludes to this when Yusuf alayhi salam says, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. Surely your soul will command towards evil. إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Except that which your Lord has mercy upon. Then there is a second stage of the nafs according to the Holy Quran. The ulama say this is the second stage of the nafs. In Surah Qiyamah, Surah 75, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة. I take an oath by the nafs al-lawama, the blaming soul. The soul that blames you. The soul that holds you to account. And the ulama famously say that this soul, this nafs, this stage of the nafs is when you do an evil action, but you feel some guilt. You have your conscience is now alive. Your soul is not just commanding towards evil. It has some concept of good and bad. It's awakened to that concept. It's awakened to the concept of blaming itself, of saying that, you know what, we should be trying to do better. This is the self-accounting or the blaming soul. And the ulama famously say this is the second stage. The third stage, according to the ulama, famously according to the Holy Quran, is nafs al-mutma'inna, the soul which is content. Radiyatan mardiyya. It is satisfied with Allah and Allah is satisfied with the soul. Nafs al-mutma'inna, it's content. It's reached the stage of contentment. Now it's mastered itself. And now it is happy to do what its Lord commands him to do. And he is happy to do everything that Allah wants him to do. And Allah is also pleased with the soul. This is the highest stage of the soul. This is the kind of perfect stage, the ultimate stage of the soul. The nafs al-mutma'inna. There are many ulama that question this concept, however. Because there are times in our life, nafs al-ammara and nafs al-lawama will intermingle. You'll find there are some people, there'll be certain actions, certain sins, they can't control themselves. They'll swear and they won't even think twice about it. They'll listen to haram music, it won't even bother them, they won't even think about it, they'll just do it. It's just part of their daily routine. But that same individual, when he goes and he, for example, shouts at somebody and he makes them feel bad, he'll blame himself. He'll be like, I shouldn't have done that. That same individual, there'll be times, for example, he doesn't wake up for Fajr and he feels bad. Is this individual in stage 1 or in stage 2? And therefore, ulama say, no, these are states, not stages. Stages mean that he is always either ammara or always lawama. No, the ulama say, no, these aren't stages, these are states. And your soul will kind of waver between these states according to your control over it. There will be times where, for example, you will do a bad action, you won't even think about it. That's your soul commanding you. But there will be other times you do that same sin, but you think to yourself twice and you think, actually, that wasn't the right thing to do. Now, what comes into play here? The aql, the intellect. How much you have spiritual consciousness and connection, how much you are actually thinking about accounting for your own soul. Where does this come into play? How do we make sure we're always accounting for the soul? In the Quran, Allah alludes to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Hashr, Surah 59 verse 19, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Do not be like those who forgot Allah. فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Do not be like those individuals who have forgotten Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they have forgotten their own selves. We ask the question, what does it mean to forget yourself? How does an individual forget himself? If anything, somebody who doesn't care about his soul thinks about nothing but himself. It's always about himself. But the wording is what? أنفسهم. They have forgotten their own nafs. They have forgotten the real part of themselves. They have forgotten the actual part of themselves. Those individuals who have forgotten Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they forget the spiritual realm. They forget the realm inside you. And that is why 2 weeks ago we mentioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He opens the Quran. What does He say? Alif Lam Mim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book, there is no doubt in it. It is a guide for the muttaqeen. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. The first characteristic of the muttaqeen, they recognize the unseen world. They recognize there's more to me than just the physical self. There is more to my existence than just this physical individual. There is a spirit inside me. There is a soul inside me. And therefore, I have to guide and purify this soul inside me. And so when somebody starts to pay attention towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, automatically he starts to pay attention to his own self. Now when we ponder on these states of the soul, the ammara and the lawama, now we think to ourselves, sometimes we do bad deeds. Sometimes we account for ourselves, and we should account for ourselves more. Imam al-Qadim salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, He famously says, he who does not account for himself every day, he is not from among us. And so now we have to go upon this path of accounting for ourselves. When we account for ourselves, we will recognize there are times we do deeds without even thinking about them. There are certain things that we do and we've become very passive towards them. There may be, for example, we talk to somebody in a certain way and actually it is wrong. Or we talk about certain individuals in a certain way. We are accustomed to backbiting at work, for example. We are accustomed to, for example, swearing, and we don't even think about these things anymore. In these cases, the nafs has become ammara. It's like a child again. That child wants something, you gave into that desire. You kept giving into it. Now when the child, you want to stop it from doing that, it's very difficult. Now, how do you control lawama and how do you control ammara and come out of it? It's a difficult process. This is where we bring into the mix the concept of sabr, perseverance. Persevering against your own soul. This is the true meaning of, one of the connotations of sabr. Persevering against that soul. When we want to stop something bad in our lives, it's not easy. We may think, to ourselves, I can stop something tomorrow. I listen to music today, tomorrow I'll stop listening to music. I'll be fine. It's not that easy. The first day you might go without music, but in your head the music will still be playing. The second day you'll be sitting in your car, shaitan will be whispering to you, what's the big deal? You used to listen for the whole journey. Just listen to one song. And then you'll be thinking to yourself. The more spiritual awareness you have, the more you're able to win that battle inside you. This is called jihadun nafs, fighting yourself. The only way you can do jihadun nafs and come towards a nafs al-lawama, a complete stage of always blaming yourself and always accounting for yourself, is by having that awareness, thinking through your actions, thinking through what you're doing, and thinking through how it's impacting you in your life. And then when you're able to master the self, fully nurture the self, you've directed it in the right direction. It has bad attachments, bad habits. You've controlled it, you stopped it, you persevered it. You've tried to make it, recommend it and advise it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord that we submit to. We do everything according to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ultimate stage is mutma'inna. Mutma'inna means now you are satisfied. You are at ease. Now no matter what happens, your soul doesn't want to go towards evil. Because it is satisfied, it knows where it lies, it knows what its aims is, and is going full steam ahead. This is a very difficult stage to attain, which is why we often say it refers to our holy A'imma, and in particular we find a reference towards Imam Abi Abdullah al-Husayn, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Classically, Surah Al-Fajr is known as the Surah of Imam al-Husayn. And the Nafs al-Mutma'inna is said to refer to Abi Abdullah al-Husayn, because when you look on Ashura, this individual's Imam al-Husayn, no time in the battle does his soul even waver away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His 6-month-old baby is butchered in his own arms and he says, Ya Allah, the fact that you are watching gives me comfort at this time. Who has the power to say something along those lines? A nafs that is mutma'in. A nafs that is satisfied, that is at ease, that understands where it is. If it was us at that stage, and this is where we again need that spiritual consciousness to think through ourselves, we will waver, and it's okay. As long as we understand the wavering and are trying to build from it, we will waver. There will be times difficulties come in our lives, and we think, you know what? Forget all of this. It's too much. Why is God doing this to me? There'll be times things happen in our lives and we're unsure, we're unable to make sense of it. There'll be times things happen in our life and we want to leave off our wajibat. You will hear this story many times when people go through difficulties. Their relationship with religion starts to dwindle, starts to become weaker. This is why Imam al-Sajjad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And dua number 7 of Sahifat al-Sajjadiyah, the dua at the times of hardship and worry, near the end he says, Ya Allah, allow me never to forego or to ignore my wajibat. Okay, mustahab, I might be struggling, but allow me never to go outside the boundaries of Islam. Let me have that connection to the religion. When to build a nafs al-mutma'in, you have to get to a level where you understand that you have a soul. And then in everything that you do, you are constantly scrutinizing yourself, looking over yourself, watching over your actions, recognizing what you're doing, and whether your soul is indifferent to it or you actually have a bit of care. And then you have to sit there and start advising your soul, studying, watching over your soul. These are the concepts that the ulama speak about, the spiritual ulama. Muhasaba, muraqaba. Muhasaba meaning constantly accounting for oneself. Muraqaba, constantly watching over oneself, looking at the actions I'm doing, scrutinizing these actions. Why am I doing this? Certain times we'll do good actions. We'll volunteer in the community. We'll come and give a lecture. And we'll get lots of praise for it. And we'll be very happy. And then we'll feel like doing more. But then you have to stop and ask yourself, wait, why do I feel like doing more? Was it the praises of the people? Or was it because I recognize it was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Even on that level, you have to think through it. Can you see how spiritual consciousness changes the way you think about even the actions that you do? On that micro level, now I need to constantly look at my intentions. Why am I doing this? What am I doing it for? Is what I'm doing right or wrong? And so with this spiritual consciousness, we can start to build towards a nafs al-mutma'inna. A nafs that understands everything that comes from Allah is haqq and I must follow it. And everything outside of that is batil and I must keep away from it. It's easier said than done. Sometimes when desires are put before you, your soul will want to run towards it. Your soul will be like, allow me to have it once, just like your children. Just allow me once, please, one time. Your soul will do that to you. Sometimes you don't even recognize it, but your soul will do that to you. And if you do it, if for example you give in to one of your desires and you think later on, you'll recognize. Why did you do it? Your soul said, just this once. Stop depriving me. Let me enjoy life. Just once. Your soul does this to you. You have to nurture that soul. You have to advise that soul. But the only way you're going to do that is if you recognize the soul exists and the soul is there. And the only way you will constantly recognize your soul is if you constantly recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. And that is why first you have to have dhikr, and then you will recognize the own soul as well. And that is why the journey of recognizing Allah starts with recognizing the soul. Which is why in the famous tradition of Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. He who starts to recognize his own self, he will start to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even here, the ulama, they have a very interesting interpretation. Where they say, Amirul Mu'mineen, he actually says he recognizes his own self. He recognizes his own Lord. He doesn't say he who recognizes himself recognizes Allah. He says, Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. Because sometimes when you recognize your own self, you recognize the lords that you worship in your life. The idols that are there in your life. The attachments that you have that take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why Imam al-Rida salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says the greatest wisdom is to have acknowledgement or recognition of your own self and your own soul. Recognizing that soul inside you, that nafs inside you. Trying to scrutinize that nafs and trying to purify that nafs. As Allah says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Successful is the one who purifies it. And the one who fails is the one who allows it to become corrupt. Allows it to become blackened by sins. And so we need to build on this and start to have spiritual consciousness in our lives. Because this is what the companions of the Ahlul Bayt had. Spiritual consciousness. They knew what was happening. They knew what they were doing and why they were doing it. And their soul never perturbed for even a time. A few of them, they were perturbing before and Imam al-Hussein was able to bring them back. There were others who were with Imam al-Hussein, but they perturbed and left him. Why? Because they didn't have that control over their own nafs in order to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, an individual like Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in, somebody who knew Imam al-Hussein from a young age, somebody who had no doubts about the position of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, the maqam of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. Why is he fighting Abi Abdullah? Because his soul is dead. He's forgotten that soul. When Imam al-Hussein offers him Jannah, he says, I want the land of Ray instead. What wretched man does not recognize eternal life and wants this fleeting pleasures of this world? A man who has forgotten Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore he's forgotten his own soul and his true purpose in life. And so we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can start to become conscious of our own self, recognize our own flaws and to work on them so that we can purify ourselves and inshallah be among the companions of the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم لك الحمد بديع السماوات والأرض ذو الجلال والإكرام رب الأرباب وإله كل مألوه وخالق كل مخلوق ووارث كل شيء ليس كمثله شيء وهو بكل شيء محيط. أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت الأحد المتوحد الفرد المتفرد، وأنت الله لا إله إلا أنت الكريم المتكرم العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الرحمة سيد المرسلين، وعلي بن أبي طالب سيد الوصيين. اللهم صل على وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، والحسن المجتبى حجة الله على الخلق أجمعين، وحسين الشهيد المظلوم وارث أمير المؤمنين. اللهم وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي المنتظر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الذي ببقائه بقيت الدنيا وبيمنه رزق الورى وبوجوده ثبتت الأرض والسماء وبه يملأ الله الأرض قسطا وعدلا كما ملئت ظلما وجورا وعجل اللهم لنا ظهوره إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Trying to connect the two khutbahs and talking about something which is more of a contemporary topic. Last week we spoke about the riots in Oxford Street, and the source of these riots was what? The source of these riots on Oxford Street was social media. There was a big message on social media, a big kind of upheaval. People came together on social media and they decided to go to Oxford Street and try to rob the shops, rob JD Sports and rob other shops. And there were 34 arrest warrants, 9 were detained, etc., etc., etc. Here we want to talk about the impact of social media on our lives. Let me start with the positive. There are positives of social media, no doubt. You know, as a center right now, Hyderi, we send out things on social media. Why? Because it gets to everyone quickly. It's effective. It gets to everyone very quickly. It's useful. We connect to people perhaps we wouldn't be able to connect to otherwise. You know, even some of us, we will probably connect with family members through social media, members that we wouldn't even have heard of was not for social media. And so there are benefits to social media, no doubt. However, there are also dangers to social media, as we all know. And this is something we should be very wary of, especially because of the way social media has developed. You know, there's an interesting documentary on Netflix. I think it's called The Social Dilemma. And there's all these individuals, not obviously Mark Zuckerberg, but the people under him who helped in, you know, formulating Twitter, formulating Facebook, and formulating these algorithms. And they said when we were making this, we didn't think about the negative consequences that came out of it. And now that we've seen it, we're quite scared of it. Individuals, for example, who get insecurity because they look on social media and they see the perfect life of everybody else. People who go on social media and they see these influencers who put up nice pictures of themselves and they think, how comes I can't have a body like that? Individuals who, you know, the currency of social media is attention. People who put up pictures and they only get 1 or 2 likes and they go, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not liked. There are studies behind this showing that people are truly being affected by social media on an individual level for these simple, basic reasons. They see other people's social media and think, why can't my life be like that? They put their own pictures up and all of a sudden they don't get likes, they don't get comments, they don't get anything, and they think, oh, is there something wrong with me? Or they get a funky comment, your ears look big, or there's something wrong. And it affects them. They start to become very self-conscious. They start to think, what's happening? Above that, social media, because of the way it's free for us, because they have so many ads, correct? Why do ads buy into social media? Because number one, they know that we're going to scroll through social media. Number two, the way the algorithms work, they find the right people. When you scroll through social media, you've probably seen it. You click on one ad, then every single ad is the same thing from a different store. You click on one video, now every video that comes up is that video. In fact, they give suggested for you now. Not just your own feed, no, suggested for you. Watch this video. In fact, it goes as deep as when you watch a video, they analyze how long you watch it for to analyze how much interest you had in that video. That's how deeply they've gone into it. If I'm not mistaken, they employ attention engineers to try and see how they can grab the attention of people. And they use the same attention engineers who are used in the Las Vegas casinos to see how they can grab the attention of people. So social media is now being wired to become addictive for individuals. And we see this. Look at the studies, look at the statistics. People are spending more and more time on social media. And there are dangers to this. We see this fanciful life of other people and we start to compare ourselves to them, even though life is never as perfect as it looks on a picture. We put ourselves up and we get insecure about our own selves. Suddenly we debate people on social media thinking we're, keyboard warriors. We find life on social media. People you can't even talk in public. Go on social media and start arguing the world. Not just that, the amount of time it's taking away from us, our productivity. There are other concepts. There are people, for example, who have been, they've been victims of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying. Who knew the day would come of cyberbullying? Being bullied online on social media, feeling threatened online on social media. Of course, you hear of many crazy cases. Just taking the more simple ones, the ones that will probably affect us more. The way social media perhaps is taking away the productivity in our lives. Not just that, on top of that, social media also has started to affect our attention span. There's a PhD doctor in computer science. His name is Dr. Cal Newport. He never got social media. Even though social media was made about the same time he was going through university, he never got social media. He said the dorms in our university that took social media, firstly, their mental health decreased. Their grades decreased. And I thought, why would I want to go into something like this? And he talks about how there can be life without social media. Because there's nothing like real life interactions. There's nothing can replace real life interactions. Now, as I said, there are some benefits to social media, but especially as our children are growing up in a world that is more heavily invested by social media, where social media is everywhere. You buy a new phone, the app on the phone is social media, and you can't even remove it because it says it's a default app. You're not even allowed to delete it anymore. We have to try and make sure we are calibrating our children or guiding them on the use of these things. They are used as social media to connect to people. You spend half an hour on it, an hour maximum a day, and I was probably pushing it. You don't spend hours on there. You don't keep scrolling through it. You don't get bored and go on it and just to get some simple satisfaction, watch a meme or get happy. Even our ulama are now saying, individuals come and complain about the length of our lectures. Why? Because social media has reduced their attention and attention spans. Now everything has to be 2 or 3 minutes long. We make a video of 10 minutes, they say, try and make it 5 minutes. Because everything needs to be quick. We need quick satisfaction, quick gratification. Even the way we seek knowledge. Because of social media, some people are happy to scroll through these little posters with bite-sized knowledge. The idea of seeking knowledge and reading through a book sometimes is lost. How many of us have 100 books on the shelf where we've read 1 chapter of every book, but we never read any of the books in total? We read through bite sizes, right? It's the way we think now because of the way social media is changing the way we have attention. We don't want to concentrate and read the whole book. We'll just do a blink, read a few of the main points, and we're happy with that. We don't want in-depth knowledge. We just want to know a little bit about everything. It's even killing our pursuit of knowledge. And that is why when we use social media, all we need to do is make sure, firstly, we limit the usage of it. If you limit the usage of it, you will save yourself from most of the dangers of it. These things about going into random groups, taking in online communities, talking to people you don't know. If you're limited, you can't do it. Even if you do it, it's very little risk. You're not going to do anything. But being aware of these dangers. And Dr. Cal Newport, who's written books about why we should keep away from social media or at least limit it, he says that, you know what, if you can give time and attention to a task, the productivity you will have, you cannot even imagine. People today can't imagine productivity anymore because they are so invested in social media. Part of their productivity is social media. But because your attention span is reducing, you get less done in your workday. Because even during your workday, I see it with my own colleagues, even me sometimes. Allah protect me. In between patients, we have to check the notifications. We have to have a quick look. Even in America, they coined a syndrome, phantom phone syndrome. There are some people that think their phone is vibrating even when it's not vibrating because they're expecting a notification. We need to just be wary of these effects because then there can be larger consequences. And we need to protect ourselves and our children from this. There are good uses of social media. Limit the use of it. Use it the correct way. And save yourself from the dangers of it because those dangers can halt you on your progression towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even concentrating on salat is now difficult. With social media, it's even more difficult. Everything has to be 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes max. Salat of 3-4 minutes, too long. No. Let us build our attention spans. Let us limit our use of social media. Use it to its good effect so that we can become more productive individuals. And inshallah, using this productivity, we can race towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وأقم الصلاة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. I'm sure everyone will come forward for the connection. Fill the rows from the front, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء وقد أمرت المحسن أن يتجاوز عن المسيء. أنت المحسن عن المسيء بحق محمد وآله. صل على محمد وآله وتجاوز عن قبيح ما تعلم مني. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين. ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم، لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله رب السماوات السبع ورب الأرضين السبع وما فيهن وما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم إني أسألك الراحة عند الموت والعفو عند الحساب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله أول قبل الإنشاء والإحياء، والآخر بعد فناء الأشياء، العليم الذي لا ينسى من ذكره ولا ينقص من شكره، ولا يخيب من دعاه، ولا يقطع رجاء من رجاه. اللهم إني أشهدك وكفى بك شهيدا، وأشهد جميع ملائكتك وسكان سماواتك وحملة عرشك، ومن بعثت من أنبيائك ورسلك وأنشأت من أصناف خلقك، أني أشهد أنك أنت الله، لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، ولا عديل ولا خلف لقولك ولا تبديل، وأن محمدًا صلى الله عليه وآله عبدك ورسولك، أدى ما حملته إلى العباد، وجاهد في الله عز وجل حق الجهاد، وأنه بشر بما هو حق من الثواب، وأنذر بما هو صدق من العقاب. اللهم ثبتني على دينك ما أحييتني، ولا تزغ قلبي بعد إذ هديتني، وهب لي من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صل على محمد وآل محمد، واجعلني من أتباعه وشيعته، واحشرني في زمرته، ووفقني لأداء فرض الجمعات وما أوجبت علي فيها من الطاعات، وقسمت لأهلها من العطاء في يوم الجزاء، إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. وصل يا رب على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Assalamu alaikum. Can we please recite Surah Fatiha for all our marhumin, mu'mineen and mu'minat? Al-Fatiha. Dua Shifa is requested for all those who are unwell or suffering today. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra wa yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarra da'a wa yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarra wa yakshifu su. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد. Finally, as is the usual Friday practice, your donations are most welcome. Last week the donations were quite poor, and I would urge that you all donate generously, so at least I have some surplus to buy our Sheikh a cup of Costa coffee. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. وأشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المعصومين بالحق حجج الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا مسلما وما أنا من المشركين. إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا من المسلمين. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. الله أكبر. اللهم اغفر لي وارحمني. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. يا رب اغفر لنا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. يا خير المسؤولين ويا خير المعطين، ارزقني وارزق عيالي من فضلك فإنك ذو الفضل العظيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا شديد القوى ويا شديد المحال، يا عزيز يا عزيز يا عزيز، ذلت بعظمتك جميع خلقك فاكفني شر خلقك. يا محسن يا مجمل يا منعم يا مفضل، يا لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين. صلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين سيد الوصيين إمام المتقين. السلام عليك يا سيدة نساء العالمين فاطمة الزهرة. السلام عليك يا أم المؤمنين خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبو الفضل العباس وأختيك زينب وأم كلثوم بنتك سكينة. السلام عليك يا زين العابدين ومحمد الباكر وجعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرضه، السلام عليك يا عين الله في خلقه، السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها المحذب الخائف، السلام عليك أيها الولي الناصح، السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة، السلام عليك يا عين الحياة، السلام عليك صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليك عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر. السلام عليك يا مولاي، أنا مولاك عارف بأولاك وأخراك، أتقرب إلى الله تعالى بك وبآل بيتك وأنتظر ظهورك وظهور الحق على يديك، وأسأل الله يصلي على محمد وآل محمد وأن يجعلني من المنتظرين لك والتابعين والناصرين لك على أعدائك والمستشهدين بين يديك في جملة أوليائك. يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان، صلوات الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك. هذا يوم الجمعة وهو يومك المتوقع فيه ظهورك والفرج فيه للمؤمنين على يديك وقتل الكافرين بسيفك، وأنا يا مولاي فيه ضيفك وجارك، وأنت يا مولاي كريم من أولاد الكرام ومأمور بالضيافة والإجارة، فاضفني واجرني. صلوات الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك الطاهرين. نزيلك حيث ما اتجهت ركابي وضيفك حيث كنت من البلاد. السلام عليكم يا ساداتي وموالي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن